Hi, everybody. Brad Truax here from Eastman Woodlands and Wildlife Committee. Today, we're going to talk about otters and mink. Many of you already seen our previous video on weasels and fishers. Those are the terrestrial members of the weasel family. But today, we're going to talk about two semi-aquatic members of the weasel family. Now, those being the river otter and the mink. This is a river otter. The North American river otters are mustelids, members of the weasel family. And like other members, they have long, narrow bodies, short legs, and a flattened head, really ideal for aquatic activities. Typical adult river otters weigh between 10 and 33 pounds, and they're about 2.5 to 5 feet long, and the tail makes up about a third of their length. And the females are considerably smaller than the males. Uh, Otters have thick, oily, protective fur that keeps them warm in cold water and in snow. Their fur is a brownish gray color that's lighter on their belly and their face. And their feet are webbed, which is great for swimming. And they have a long, strong tail that helps propel them in the water. And they have whiskers that help them detect prey in dark or murky water. So they're really built for water. Even though they're only semi-aquatic, they spend much of their time in the water. Their powerful tail acts both as a rudder and a propeller. They can make sharp, sudden turns that help them catch fish, and they can swim 6 to 7 miles per hour, both above and below the water. They can dive up to 60 feet deep and stay underwater for up to 4 to 8 minutes at a time. And they have valves in both their ears and their nostrils that close to exclude water. And they also have a clear third eyelid called a nictitating membrane that covers and protects their eyes when they're underwater. And like some other aquatic mammals, they have a dive reflex where their heart rate slows considerably when they dive into the water. River otters, again, are semi-aquatic mammals. They like to eat crayfish, amphibians, reptiles, and fish from rivers and streams. Here you see a picture of a river otter that has something in his mouth, most likely a fish of some sort. And their long whiskers actually help them locate prey in dark or cloudy water. This slide is showing these incredible whiskers that they have. Really, these whiskers are amazing tools. They're long, stiff, and very sensitive, and they sense vibrations and water flow and pressure to help them locate prey in dark, murky water. There's a network of nerves that goes from the base of the whiskers that sends tactile information to their brain. The river otters have a thick protective fur that keeps them warm in winter. It's really the densest fur of any animal. There's up to 1 million hairs per square inch. They have an outer layer of long guard hairs that insulate them and provide some degree of buoyancy. And the underfur is a dense, short, oily, interwoven fur that really keeps water off their skin. The otter's feet are webbed and they act as natural paddles. They also have very sharp claws that help them grasp slippery prey. The claws also assist them in climbing onto rocks, navigating vegetation, and grasping objects along riverbanks. They also have highly sensitive pads on their feet, which also help them detect vibrations and movements of prey underwater. River otters are great swimmers. Again, they can make sharp, sudden turns that are very useful in helping them catch fish. They can stay underwater for as many as 8 minutes at a time. They can swim up to 6 to 8 miles per hour. And though they actually spend much of their time on land, they're truly semi-aquatic, going into the water to fish and to play. Otters are said to be excellent indicators of good water quality, but if the water quality is bad, they can be vulnerable to toxins in the water like lead and mercury. Otters spend most of their time in the water, but they also need land. And unlike beavers, which are slow and clumsy on land, river otters can run up to 15 miles per hour on land, and they can slide even faster. More on that later. They may search for food or a mate when they're on land, and they typically have a range of 3 to 15 square miles. Otters are social animals. Though they tend to live alone or with a mate, they're well known for their social interactions. It's common to see multiple otters playing together. So let's see if we can see them in this video. There you see the otters playing both in the water, climbing up on land, chasing each other. They're having a great time. That's rather typical. Once again, here are three otters that are climbing up on rocks. They seem to like rock ledges alongside the water. So, what do otters eat? As you might expect, they eat a variety of aquatic wildlife and occasionally aquatic plants. They eat fish, crayfish, crabs, frogs, but they'll also eat birds' eggs, birds, and even reptiles such as small turtles. They may also prey on other small mammals like muskrats or rabbits, and rarely they may even prey on beaver kits. They have a very high metabolism, so they need to eat frequently. In fact, they need to eat about 15 to 20% of their own body weight each day. Otters are most active at dusk and dawn, but we often see them when we're out kayaking during the day. They tend to swim and play in small groups, so if you see one, keep looking, you'll probably see more than one. Sometimes their heads will pop out of the water and they'll utter a hiss when we get too close to them in a kayak. We might actually see them more often in winter when they're more often out on land. Otters communicate via a variety of sounds, but the hiss is probably the sound that we hear most frequently. And that's because if we get too close to them in our kayak, they'll pop out and hiss at us. When they're threatened or frightened, they're said to emit a hair-raising scream that can be heard as far as 1.5 miles away across the water. They also communicate by scenting and scent marking. Like all mammals in the weasel family, they have anal glands that produce a strong, musky odor. And they also scent mark with both their urine and their feces. And their scat has a very strong, fishy odor, which really isn't surprising in view of the diet that they have. River otter dens are usually dug along the banks of rivers and streams. You can see one here. And they might also den in abandoned burrows or empty hollows. Sometimes they'll den in an abandoned beaver lodge. And the dens typically have entrances underwater so that they can easily access the den from the water. River otters breed in late and early spring, but there's delayed implantation of 9 to 11 months. The gestation period is 60 to 90 days. So in April or May, they will give birth to 1 to 3 pups. And the pups are blind and helpless when they're born. The male otter typically leaves until the pups are weaned and then returns. The pups first emerge from the den and learn how to swim after about 2 months. But by late fall, the young may be ready to seek new territories on their own, although some will stay with the family through the following winter and then go off on their own in the next spring, just before the next young are born. And river otters generally live alone or in small social groups. They can live up to 8 to 12 years in the wild and up to 27 years in captivity, but more typically, they'll survive for about 6 years in the wild. Mortality tends to be greatest during the first year of life. Otter tracks are defined in the snow by a slightly slanted pattern of 4 feet. So you can see them here. And sometimes you'll see a slight imprint of the tail dragging. So here you see a slight imprint that somewhat obscures the footprint. This is, again, showing both the slanted nature of the 4 footprints. Otters have 5 digits on each foot, and the claw marks are typically visible, and they're slightly longer on the front feet. And remember, the claws are very helpful for helping them grasp slippery prey. The toes are more splayed in the otter than in the other members of the weasel family. So this is the otter here. And there's a second small foot pad that's sometimes seen. So here's the main foot pad. Here's this little tiny thing in the back. So sometimes that will show in a track. And again, the otter tracks are twice the size of weasel tracks and mink tracks, but about the same size as fisher tracks. Otters love to slide. They love to slide in the snow and the mud. Look at this guy go. And here's a otter slide here at Eastman. This is over in Frog Pond, which is one of the kind of unknown gems that we have here at Eastman. Here's more otter slides coming down a hill. There's actually very little else that could produce slides like this. I suppose a child on a saucer could produce something that looks like this, but if you pay close attention here, these slide tracks are about 6 to 10 inches wide, and you'll see some web footprints inside it. Otter scat is very distinctive. It's very oily and particularly odorous, has a very strong fishy smell. And in fact, it's so distinctive that it's even given its own name, spraints. And it may contain fish scales, fish bones, plus the exoskeletons of aquatic insects or crayfish. So that's what you're seeing up here, very oily here. But once the oil evaporates, you may just be left with a pile of fish scales. River otters also often scat in latrines, meaning that they come back to the same place to scat, and multiple different otters will come back to that spot to scat. So these latrines are often social sites. The otters actually spend considerable time there, both standing, sniffing, and rubbing at the sprain sites rather than just pooping. There are challenges to the otters. They can live up to 12 to 15 years, but most only survive about 6 years in the wild. And they have very few predators, mostly bobcats, coyotes, dogs, or very large raptors, and occasionally other large predators like bears or cougars here in New Hampshire. In other parts of the country, alligators might be a predator. They're pretty safe from predators while they're in the water, but they're a little bit more vulnerable when they're on land. And trapping, hunting, and loss of habitat due to human construction and pesticides and water pollution are their biggest threats. And they may be affected by parasites and viruses like parvovirus, and rarely they might contract and transmit rabies. Mortality may be high in very cold winters when the ice covers all the water sites that they need for catching food. So, if you see a little brown spot pop up in the water, was that an otter that you saw? Or was it a beaver? Or was it a muskrat? Or was it a mink? At least all four of these semi-aquatic mammals, at least superficially, resemble each other when they're in the water. So how do we tell them apart? Well, we have to look at the size, the tail, the face, and see whether there's whiskers. We look at the swimming pattern, and we look to see what might be in its mouth. So again, here's a river otter, here's a muskrat, here's a mink, and here's a beaver. So again, the beaver is the biggest. It's about 50 pounds and has only a few chin whiskers. It's got the classic large paddle-like tail that produces a pulsing motion in the water. And you may hear that tail slap producing a very characteristic sound. And the beavers swim mostly with just their head above water, and they make a V shape in the water when they're swimming, swim in straight lines. And they eat woody plants, twigs, and trees, so you may see them swimming with a stick in their mouth. On the other hand, the otter is smaller, between 10 and 30 pounds, has these very prominent chin whiskers. And again, you might see them with the fish or other aquatic prey in their mouth. The tail of the otter is narrower and it's tapered. And they may twist and turn a lot when they're swimming. They make dolphin-like moves, and they're very playful in their swimming. The muskrat is much smaller, between 1 and 4 pounds, has kind of a chubby appearance, and has a long, skinny, rat-like tail. It produces a characteristic flickering motion when they're in the water. We'll show you a video of that in a minute. And they eat mostly grasses, so you might see them swimming with some grass in there. The mink, on the other hand, is small, probably close to the size of the muskrat, weighs about 3 pounds. They have a long, streamlined body and a smaller head than the muskrat. They have darker fur, a long furry tail, and they most often swim with their head, body, and tail at the surface. So again, whereas beavers tend to swim straight, leaving a trailing V pattern, river otters are more likely to turn than to twist. Their, sw- their swim is much more playful. So you'll often see more than one otter as well. Sorry for the commercials. These YouTube commercials pop up when we embed videos in PowerPoint. So here you see a river otter that's swimming. So he goes underwater, shows up in another spot, a little dolphin-like move there. He's swimming back and forth, probably chasing some prey there underwater. Uh, he's going to go back underwater here in a minute. Now you're going to see him pop out. And in fact, he's got a fish in his mouth. The beaver, on the other hand, tends to swim in a straight line, leaving a trailing V pattern in the water, and you may hear a loud slap with their tail. There's the slap. Once again, here he's swimming in a straight line. You see mostly his head, and there another famous tail slap. The muskrat, on the other hand, moves side to side when swimming, and there's a characteristic flickering pattern due to their tail motion. So here we're going to see the muskrat swimming. There he is, and look at that characteristic side to side flickering motion of the tail. Pretty unmistakable. And last of all, the mink. Mink, again, are excellent swimmers. They're of the four, they're most likely to have their head, body, and tail visible on the surface of the water. And here's a mink swimming on a beaver pond. There he is, comes out of the water, and actually now climbs up a tree. Remember, mink are very good climbers as well as swimmers. So we do have river otters at Eastman. This picture was taken by Rick Carish. A very good picture of a river otter. Note the prominent whiskers. Uh, you might be lucky enough to see one when you're out kayaking on the lake or in one of the streams going in and out of the lake. But because they're most active at dusk and dawn, you may never get to see one. Then you have to rely on the signs that tell us that we have river otters here. One would be that characteristic fishy smelling scat called spraints. The other would be those classic slide marks, either in the snow or in the mud. Their tracks or a denicide of the lake or stream might be signs. And if you're lucky enough to see one, keep looking around because you're very likely to see one or more playmates nearby. Okay, the second semi-aquatic mammal we'll talk about today is the mink. Mink are members of the weasel family, and they are semi-aquatic mammals. Their fur color ranges from russet to chocolate brown or black color. They often have a white chin patch. That's a bit more common in the European mink. And they're a little bigger than most weasels, anywhere from 1.5 to 2 feet long and weighing 2 to 3 pounds. The males are bigger than the females. The mink have long, streamlined bodies, which is very useful for them to follow small mammals into tiny holes. They also have short ears, short legs, and a long, furry tail. And their paws are both partially webbed, and they have very strong claws. Mink are very quick on land. They easily climb trees, and they're good swimmers. And like other mustelids, they can spray a foul-smelling liquid when they're threatened, but they can't aim that spray like a skunk can aim the spray. The famous mink coat was widely sought by trappers, and the mink's coat is very thick, full, and soft. There's a short, tight layer of underfur that's covered with long guard hairs, which give the pelt its luster. And the colors again range from russet to kind of a deep chocolate brown. And unlike some weasels, the mink does not turn white in winter. Mink are semi-aquatic. They like to live in forested areas near the water, and they're seldom very far from riverbanks or lakes or marshes. And even when they're roaming, they tend to follow streams and ditches with water. But they may leave the water to look for prey like rabbits, which happen to be one of their favorite foods. And they're very territorial. They'll use scat and scent to mark their territories. They're usually solitary. And though they're more active at night, they may occasionally be seen during the day. The male mink travels more than the female. Male may cover an area of up to 5 square miles, whereas the female home range is only about 20 to 50 acres. Their dens are usually near water, and sometimes they'll dig their own burrows, but very often they'll take over the burrow of another mammal like a muskrat. And in winter, they move inland and they may take over the den of a rabbit. They may also use cavities in brush or rock piles or exposed tree roots to den in. And their dens or burrows typically have multiple entrances. They typically also have a chamber of about 1 foot in diameter that's lined with grass, feathers, and fur that they brought there from prior prey. So, what do mink eat? Mink are carnivores, but their diet does vary by time of year. During the warmer months, they mainly eat frogs, tadpoles, fish, crayfish, and occasionally muskrats. The typical composition of their diet in warm months would be about a third fish, a quarter frogs, and a quarter crayfish. But during the cooler months, they eat more mammals, and their diets would consist of mice, voles, and especially rabbits. As members of the weasel family, they're also fierce predators. They can follow small mammals into very narrow tunnels, and they're not afraid to attack animals much larger than themselves. We'll show you a video of that in a minute. They kill with a bite to the neck, and large prey, such as rabbits, are then often carried back to the den and stored there. Mink will also eat snakes, birds, and eggs, and poultry if it's accessible. And rarely they'll even eat young mink. Mink, again, we mentioned, are ferocious hunters. They're very quick and they're very agile, and they're not afraid to attack animals larger than themselves. So let's watch this video. Once again, we're going to skip this commercial. Okay, here's the mink. He's caught, there he's got a crab. There he's caught something. There he's actually jumping up at a coyote. Here he's capturing a fish much bigger than himself. Okay, here he's got a rabbit, again, much bigger than himself. Here he's even got a swan. So they're unbelievable, ferocious predators. Mink are also excellent swimmers. Again, they can swim underwater for 100 feet. They can dive up to 16 feet. And again, in this video, you can see the mink both swimming and climbing a tree. Mink tracks are down here. They're about the same size as weasel tracks, much smaller than either the river otter or the fisher tracks. And mink have 5 digits, but sometimes only 4 show. And the claw marks are typically visible. You can see claw marks there. The claws are very good for capturing prey and for climbing trees. And the track pattern is somewhat unique. It's a loping gait with a double print. And I'll show that. So it's a loping gait. You see it a little bit better here. So you see all 4 paws here, and then they leap forward. And we'll watch on another video the mink leaping like or loping such as a weasel lopes. Mink scat is typically about 3 inches long. It often looks like a braided rope, and it typically contains small bones, fur, feathers, crayfish parts, and fish bones. And like other weasels, they tend to leave their scat on elevated surfaces like rocks, logs, stumps, or even docks. Mating takes place for the mink between January and March, and the young are typically born in April or May. They have one litter per year with 4 to 7 kits. And the kids start exploring outside the den at about 6 to 8 weeks of age, and they begin to learn to hunt right away. Young mink are often on their own by late summer or early fall. And minks are able to breed at 10 to 12 months of age. So basically, a year after they're born, they're already able to breed. Mink do have predators, mainly coyotes, fox, bobcats, and great horned owls, and sometimes a large river otter. They're also vulnerable to parasites and especially to chemical pollutants in the water like mercury or PCBs. And human developments near water have greatly reduced their habitat. And they rarely live longer these days than 3 to 5 years in the wild. In wintertime, mink mainly remain mostly in their dens, but they don't hibernate. So, unlike the weasel, their coat does not turn white in winter, it stays black. And in winter, with less aquatic food sources available, they have to rely more often on small mammals for prey or on rabbits. So it might be somewhat easier for you to spot a mink in winter because you can see the dark coat against the white snow. So there you see a mink, shows up nicely against the white snow. So once again, they usually stay in their dens, but they don't hibernate. So if food is available, they'll venture outside the den to hunt. Here you have a mink that's caught a frog. I don't know what a frog was doing out in winter. And unlike the weasel, their coat does not turn white, stays dark all year. So where are you most likely to see a mink? Well, much of their activity is nocturnal, so we don't see them very often. You may occasionally see them swimming in a lake, a pond, or a stream. We most often see them in riverbanks or under docks when we're out kayaking. And like the fisher, their dark coat also makes them easier to see against the snow in wintertime. Probably the animal most often confused with the mink is the fisher. Minks are smaller, usually about 12 to 16 inches, and they weigh somewhere around 1 to 2 pounds, whereas the fishers are larger. They're up to 31 inches, and they may weigh up to 12 pounds, and they have a very bushy, longer tail. So here, if you look at the trees for reference, again, down here, you see a fisher that's almost as wide as the tree diameter, whereas up here, the mink is much smaller than the diameter of the tree. Uh, Looking here again, a mink is up here, the fisher is down here. This nicely highlights the difference in size between the two. And I've also thrown in here an intermediate sized animal, the marten. Now, we don't have martens here in Eastman. Martens would be found mainly up in the White Mountains and in Canada. And the martens are maybe 18 to 25 inches. They have this lighter brown fur with this cream colored bib, so you can nicely see that. So this is a good slide that really highlights the difference between these three mammals. And here's a great video that shows a fisher, a weasel, a mink, and a river otter. And notice how the mink bounds like the weasel does. And of course, the river otters like to slide. Here's a fisher. Actually, they're calling this a bobfish or tail. Again, that's still the fisher. Here's the weasel. It's a long-tailed weasel. Look at the bounding gait that he has. So it's a bounding, loping kind of gait. And we'll see the mink often does the same thing, a bounding gait. Okay, there's the mink. Yep, here's the river otter getting ready to slide. Having a great time playing in the snow. Okay, so that's a little bit about otters and mink. Hope you've enjoyed this.